Hi there, really great to see you again today. What if you could choose your beliefs? This is me, Pam Wellsby from Fast Forward International, here with the sixth of our toolbox techniques to help you both now in the current situation as well as in your life in general. Today's technique is around the beliefs of excellence. Last week, we talked about how to make change stick. How do we make it last? Habits that we want to introduce. How do we make sure they last for the long term? And one of the things we touched on was the impact that beliefs have in our actions, our decisions, our choices, and ultimately our results, the success we have or not. So today, what I'm going to do is share with you 7 examples that come from beliefs of excellence, meaning these beliefs are ways that help us to be more successful in what we do. They shift our way of thinking, and when we change our way of thinking, we have more options about what to do, how to behave to achieve what we really want. So, I'm going to explore those one by one. So here today, you see a happy person here who is living the beliefs of excellence. And we're going to explore one by one each of those 7 examples of beliefs of excellence. So, if you're ready, let's start. So our first belief of excellence is that I am the sole master of my thought processes. Now I ask you to just think about that for a moment. Do you believe that? Do you believe that you are the sole master of your thought processes? Well, when I ask myself that question, I think, well, if I'm not, then who is? Yeah? Surely it must be me. It must be me. Yeah? So why is that belief so important if it's perhaps quite obvious actually? If we accept that as a real belief, then it means I'm in control of what I'm thinking, or I should be. That it's important that I am aware of my thoughts and how they're affecting how I feel, or what I'm doing, or how I'm communicating. So if I am the sole master of my thought processes, it means I can influence and change things. Because I can change the way I'm thinking, I can change the way I'm doing things. This is an example of how these beliefs of excellence can empower us. They give us more power, the ability to decide differently, to do things differently. So take a moment to reflect on what that means for you. When we spoke about the science of emotions a week or 2 ago, we explored the thinking part in that process and recognized that we do have choices to think differently. We used reframing as one example of how to do that. That means I do have control, or I can have control. I am the sole master of my thought processes. Let's take a look at number 2. So number 2 says, a person's behaviour is not who they are. So how we behave is different from who we are. Again, if you remember those logical levels of change from last week, we saw on that pyramid that behaviour is quite on a low level, whereas identity, who we are, is on a much higher level. So those 2 things are not the same. Yeah? Of course they are impacting each other. How I behave can impact who I am, and who I am can decide who I behave, but they are not the same thing. Now why does that matter? Well, let's say I'm having a bad day and I really didn't respond well to some discussion that was going on in the family today. And I really overreacted, I lost my temper, etc. So, does that mean that that's the kind of person I am? My identity? Or does that mean it's how I behave today when actually I wasn't at my best? Actually, I regret that. I would like to apologize for that. It was just the best I could do in that moment. So who we are and how we behave are not the same thing. And we hope that people around us will realize that and not judge us based on who they think we are because of some certain things we did and said. Now that means if we hold that belief, then that's how we look at other people. That we accept that their behaviour is not who they are. If we do that, how does that help us? Well, it helps us to be less judgmental. It helps us to be more accepting of people, even under the most challenging times for them. It helps us to think that if they're behaving in some strange way, that maybe they're not having a good day. And instead of reacting to that or blaming them for something, maybe I can actually explore how they are and see if I can help them. This changes our relationships, the quality of our relationships and our communication. So this can have a big impact on our connection with others in our life. So, let's go on to number 3. Number 3 says, whatever I focus on grows and expands. Now, if you remember back to the science of emotions, we said there's an event, like, for example, someone who's angry, frustrated, and our emotional brain processes that as a threat or a reward. In this case, probably a threat. If that's the case, we then start to experience various negative emotions. Maybe we're angry or frustrated, or we're stressed, or we're worried. And that information gets passed to our thinking brain. Now, when it gets passed to our thinking brain, because its negative emotions are going with it, the thinking brain restricts. So it's limited. We tend to focus more on that. And of course, the more we focus on that, the more angry we might feel, or the more stressed we might feel. In other words, whatever we focus on grows and expands. It's all that we can see. Now, if we believe that I'm the sole master of my thought processes, then we know that we have the option to change what we're focusing on. We know this from the science of emotions. We know it from the reframing process that we looked at. We can change what we're focusing on by changing our perception of that situation. This is also what we did with this belief. We changed our perception of how we were seeing someone else. In this case, we're changing our perception of what's going on inside of us and how we choose to look at a situation. Now, if we succeed to change that and we start to feel more positive emotions, well, of course, the more we focus on those things, the more they will grow and expand. So the happier we feel, the happier we become. The more generous we feel, the more generous we become. The more positive we are, the more positive we become. So this is why it's so important, both what we're thinking and what we're feeling are very much connected to both of those two things. And we can manage both of them by changing how we're seeing in our heads. And these beliefs of excellence are a way to make that shift, a different way to make a change in our thinking in order to handle a situation better. Let's look at number 4. So number 4, there are no unresourceful people, only unresourceful states. Now this clearly connects to what we've already spoken about here, where the person's behaviour is not who they are. So now we're speaking about our inner resources. So we might talk about some people to say, well, that person's more resourceful, they're more positive, more optimistic. Whereas we might speak about others as being less resourceful. Now, what we're saying here is there are no unresourceful people. As human beings, we have the same inner resources available to us. But in the moment, what state are we in? Are we in a state of mind that enables us to tap into those resources? Or are we in, at that moment, an unresourceful state, which means we cannot tap into those resources? I hope by now you're starting to see not just the connections between these beliefs, but the connections to the different tools that we've already shared with you during this series, how each are helping you in different ways to improve what you're doing, to feel better, more positive, and to improve your quality of life overall. So let's try another one. Number 5. The meaning of the communication is the response I get. Now let's think about what that means for a moment. Let's say I've been explaining something to someone, I've shared my view on something, and they don't seem to get what I'm speaking about at all. Now, the question then is, how do I respond to that? If I believe that the meaning of my communication is the response I get from them, then their response is telling me, I really didn't explain that well. I thought it made sense, but clearly it doesn't make the same sense to them as it did to me. So I can explain it in a different way. This is kind of empowering. It means that we're taking responsibility for our communication. This can also have a big positive impact on our relationships, because we realize that when somebody didn't understand us, it doesn't mean that they weren't listening. It simply means they couldn't process it in the way in which we explained it. So we can explain it differently. The meaning of the communication is the response I get. This is a great one to practice in your daily communications with anyone. Identify those moments where there seems to be a misunderstanding and immediately think, how could I explain myself again differently? And see what difference that makes to that situation. You'll be quite surprised. Let's go on to number 6. This is one of my favourites. If it is to be, it's up to me. Now what does that mean? Am I responsible for everything? Do I have to do everything? No, of course not. We are cooperating with others all the time. We share our lives with others. Of course we help and support each other. But what I am responsible for is to make happen the things I want to happen, to be the person I want to be, to manage myself in the way in which I want to manage myself, to achieve the things I want to achieve. If it is to be, it's up to me. That means we look to ourselves first. In any situation we find ourselves in, we think, what could I do differently? For example, could I communicate differently? Am I using my inner resources? Or can I help somebody else find their inner resources? What am I focusing on? Can I focus on something that's going to empower me, enable more success? Or do I stay stuck where I am right now? These are all examples of us deciding how we want to be for ourselves, and to look first at ourselves for the changes we want to make. And our last of the 7. There is no failure, only feedback. This one is great. I really like this one. So, what does that mean? Do we never fail? I mean, look back through our lives. Are there things we failed at? Probably yes. So how can there be no failure? Only feedback. So what is the feedback? Well, feedback in this case is not necessarily something somebody says to you, but it's the result of what happened. So I tried to do something and it didn't go well. It didn't work. Well, we can say that's a piece of feedback. And I can explore that to identify what didn't go well. Why did it not work? What could I do differently? If I continue and try again in a different way, I have not failed yet. As long as I keep learning and trying different things, I am still in process of succeeding. And therefore, I have not yet failed. When we look at, for example, sports people, those people who win the Olympic medals, let's take athletes as an example. Think of all the times, all the races they have not won, all the times they have failed. If they chose to see that as a failure, I can't do this, the chances are they would never have been at that point of winning the gold medal. But if every time they lose, they take it as an opportunity to review that race. What did I do? How did I do it? Had I trained well? How was my nutrition? What was my state of mind? They are learning and improving again and again and again. And as long as they don't give up, they have not failed. So, there is no failure, only feedback. Now the question is, how are you going to use these beliefs for yourself right now? So I said before, it's about understanding that we do have control over our beliefs. We can change them. We can decide to believe something different. So I would like you to experiment with these 7. So in this week, I ask you to write these for yourself and maybe stick them around where you are at the moment. Seeing as we're not going anywhere, that should be quite easy. Once you've done that, then pay attention to the people you speak to this week, the conversations you have, how the things you are doing, how things go and so on, and see which of these might be applying. Where is there an opportunity to use one of them intentionally that could help you in a particular situation? So really what you're doing is practicing applying them as appropriate to the situation you're in. So, what I hope for you is that by experimenting with these, later you can start to explore more of your own actual beliefs and decide, is this belief serving me or would I like to change it? What could I believe instead? And that is likely to be a topic for a future session. How do we change some of our limiting beliefs into more productive beliefs? But this is a first step on the way to start experimenting with different beliefs and how they can really empower you and enable you. So as always, thank you for joining me for today's session. You can follow us, Fast Forward International, LinkedIn, Facebook and YouTube. You can catch up on YouTube on all the sessions that we've been speaking about so far. So if I mentioned things that you hadn't heard before, go to YouTube, Fast Forward International, and you'll be able to catch up with us. So once again, thank you so much for joining me today, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.